Okay, welcome back. This is a new episode. Today we're talking about material motion. I'm Luca.
I'm Shanine.
And let's start. Cool. What happened recently, Google released just a new update on their guidelines for Android, which is called material design. This new set of guidelines is called material motion, and this is the subject of what today we are going to study.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so before we begin, actually, I think we need to do a little bit of an introduction so that it all makes sense for all the viewers.
And me.
And you, exactly. So what is material design? Let's start from that. Material design simply is a visual language, and it's a collection of rules that help developers and designers to create applications that are consistent with the overall Google visual design language.
Mm-hmm.
So that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. It saves you time, but also allows people to create applications that have something in common, which makes the experience of using these apps more consistent, independently of the developer who creates them. Does it make sense?
Yeah, I think so. So it's kind of how Google wants developers for Android apps to follow their kind of language so that they have a consistency beyond their own brand, kind of.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And this makes the user's life much easier from a user experience perspective, because they don't have to learn how things work.
They come to expect certain things.
That's exactly it.
Okay.
So both Google and Apple have their own guidelines, and material design is the guideline of Google, of course. So it's online, it's free. You can go and have a look to it. It's quite nice actually to learn about it. What they recently did, they added this motion section to it. Motion has always been very important for material design, but they never really described it. So what they did now instead, they took the time to explain it more in detail, and that's what we are going to review today. Okay, so a little introduction, what material design is and what are the principles that govern it. What they did is they create a visual language based on the metaphor of paper and ink. Okay, so they actually went into great details in experimenting with paper and filming paper, so to understand how shadows are cast and all of the properties that paper have and ink. They try to summarize them and make them digital. So some of these properties are retained and others instead are purely digital. So we will see in the animations that material design, these pieces of digital paper can connect one another and can move and can stretch, things that paper wouldn't normally do. So they took only certain aspects of the real paper.
What made them choose paper and ink? Was it because it's already familiar for people?
Probably. Yes, exactly. I think if you read the guidelines, they explain it. They use paper because essentially it's something really common and works well as a metaphor.
Okay.
So if you study material design, even in the introduction, you will see that it's a metaphor. And metaphors are good because they use existing knowledge, right? This is what they use. As you can see here, material is grounded in a tactile reality inspired by the study of paper and ink, but it is also technologically advanced. Okay, so what we are studying today is how these pieces of digital paper move around the screen and how people interact with them and how they actually come alive with animation. Okay, you see here they describe like motion provides meaning, and it's really inspiring. It's really cool. So before we actually start, another little introduction on what motion graphic design is. I think this is needed for us to understand what motion design is, because it's an art, it's a job. There are people specialized only in motion design. So this kind of guidelines for them is gold. Not because they couldn't do it otherwise, but because at least they know how to do it in a way that respects Google guidelines. So they know how to make it consistent for the creation of applications, for example, because it will help you communicate the developers the timings for the transitions, which kind of transitions to use, and so forth. So I went on Wikipedia. There is a description in here that I really like. But first of all, motion graphic design is a subset of graphic design. of course.
Yeah.
And uses graphic design principles. They're particularly used in filmmaking or video production, right? Through the use of animations and film techniques. Kinetic typography. This is quite cool. I don't know if you've ever seen those videos based on typography where there are like all these texts moving around in the video in very fancy ways. They usually are used as introductions, maybe for products, the beginning of movies. When you see the type come alive and zooming in and out and moving, transitioning and behaving almost like if it was real. With physical properties. So that's kinetic typography. It's quite interesting. But lately, with the introduction of applications and the web becoming more and more interactive and animated, motion design is becoming more and more important and more relevant today. And that's why we start seeing these guidelines for the first time, right? What I really loved here is this section. A typical motion designer is a person trained in traditional graphic design who has learned to integrate the elements of time, sound, and space into the existing skill sets of design knowledge. I really like this definition because this explains exactly the elements: time, sound, and space. Now, Google doesn't go into specifying the sound of objects. It's all about time and space so far, and I find it really interesting. So let's dive into it. Let's go into material motion. So if you look for Google design and you go into material design, this is a menu. Now today we are exploring the motion item. This is material design, what is material, and so on. And this is the section that recently added, which is motion. There are many other components. It's quite long. It takes quite a while to study it. It's quite detailed, but there are also good introductions also that make it quite easy to understand. So let's start.
Okay.